Good morning. I am Jeanette Fennell, the president and founder of the national nonprofit organization Kids and Cars Safety. We've been working very hard for the past 25 years to keep children and pets safe in and around motor vehicles. Thank you for joining us today to announce the reintroduction of the Hot Cars Act by Representatives Tim Ryan of Ohio and Jan Schakowsky of Illinois. I'd like to take this opportunity to give an extra special welcome to the parents and family members of children who have joined us today that have been affected by a hot car death or injury. Your bravery is truly what inspires us to keep working and insisting that these changes are made to vehicles. I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping details before our moderator gets us started. The first one is please mute your microphone for the entirety of the event to keep the background noise to a minimum. The press conference will be recorded and also will be available shortly after the event. We are going to hold questions until the end of the event. We're using the Zoom chat function, so please feel free to input your questions there. All of our live speakers will be available for individual interviews after the event, as well as additional family advocates in various locations around the country. I'll be back at the end of the event to provide additional comments, but now I would like to introduce our moderator for the press event today, Ms. Kathy Chase, who is the president of Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. Okay, Kathy, take it away.
Thanks, Jeanette. Good morning. I'm Kathy Chase, president of Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. Advocates is an alliance of consumer, public health, medical, law enforcement, and safety groups, and insurance companies and agents working together to improve road safety in the United States. Thank you so much to everyone joining us today, and especially, as Jeanette mentioned, to the families who have suffered an unimaginable loss of a loved one. We are pleased today to announce the reintroduction of the Hot Cars Act by Representatives Tim Ryan and Jan Schakowsky. At a time when we're facing so many challenges, threats, and dangers that lack clear solutions, our nation's leaders should be taking swift action on easily solvable problems. Children either left unknowingly in a car or climbing into one without anyone knowing is a preventable problem, and the Hot Cars Act offers a proven solution. Quite simply, it directs the U.S. Department of Transportation to issue a rule requiring new cars to be equipped with technology to detect the presence of a child in a car and send alerts. Today, we'll be showing a short video with examples of this technology in action. Requiring technology to protect people in and around cars is not a new concept. Seatbelts, airbags, roof crush standards are just a few examples. In fact, they're the ones that recently, famously, saved the life of Tiger Woods when he crashed his vehicle. Unfortunately, auto manufacturers opposing sensible regulations is also not new. It's time for the auto industry to stop its stalling tactics and get behind this bill. As they push for an autonomous vehicle bill, certainly they could and should support the Hot Cars bill, which pales in comparison in terms of the complexities of the technological solutions. As the strains of the pandemic hopefully begin to ease, routines will change for many. This, combined with the warmer spring and summer weather, will bring an increased risk of hot cars deaths. We must get this bill passed now to end the suffering of families losing their children in preventable hot car incidents. I'd like to now welcome Congressman Tim Ryan. Congressman Ryan represents Ohio's 13th district, and he is the lead co-sponsor of this bill, and he has provided a video which we will share with you now. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Hi, I'm Congressman Tim Ryan. For the last 3 sessions of Congress, I've been introducing the Hot Cars Act in response to the growing number of deaths of children who are left unintended in hot cars. And this week, I'm proud to be reintroducing the Hot Cars Act of 2021 with my colleague Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. This bill would require the U.S. Department of Transportation to issue a final rule requiring cars to be equipped with a system to alert the driver if a passenger remains in the back seat when a car is turned off. No child should endure the tragedy of dying while trapped in a hot vehicle. The unfortunate reality is that even good, loving, and attentive parents can get distracted. Studies have shown that this can happen to anyone, anywhere. That is why I am proud to have Representative Schakowsky join me in introducing this important legislation. Our cars can already alert drivers when they leave their keys in the car, the lights on, or their trunk open, none of which are life-threatening. It is not unusual for the government to mandate safety features to protect lives. Cars are mandated to have seat belts, interior trunk releases, and rear backup cameras. And our legislation would move us one step closer to getting this inexpensive technology in every car on the road to help save the lives of children nationwide. I look forward to this bill passing in this Congress and signed into law by President Biden. Thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for sharing your stories. I know how difficult it's been over these past few years, listening to many of your stories, and I think it's important and courageous that you're all here to share them with members of Congress to help us get this bill passed. So thank you for your leadership, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.
We'd like to thank Congressman Ryan and his staff for their leadership and dedication to moving forward with the Hot Cars Act. I'd now like to introduce the video of Congressman Jan Schakowsky. Congresswoman Schakowsky is the chairwoman of the House Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Consumer Protection and Commerce. Thank you, Congresswoman Schakowsky.
Hi, it's Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. So we're heading towards summer, my favorite season of the year. The temperature goes up, we can spend more time outside. There are all kinds of fun activities that we can do with the family. But I want to warn you of a danger that is really lurking out there that can take the lives of children. I'm introducing legislation called Hot Cars with my colleague, Congressman Tim Ryan from Ohio. And this legislation could save the lives of many, many children. During a typical year, we can lose up to 30 children in cars that are too hot. And by the way, this can happen very quickly. Cars heat up really, really fast. And what we have and need to have in every new car is the technology that would alert a parent. Now you say that would never happen to me, but I want to tell you that research has shown that even the most attentive and caring parent can get wrapped up in routine, just driving to the office, and if the child is asleep in particular, just forget. That is the reason for most of the deaths. About a quarter of them result from children getting into cars on their own. Looks like a good place to go and play, and opening up the door and being inside. But again, there are technologies available. And think of the bells and whistles that we have on our cars. I mean, it will tell us if a tire is losing air, all of your video and song equipment that's available. And so the least we can do is to make sure that we are protecting the most precious thing in our life, and that's our children. And by the way, it can affect your dog, your puppy as well. We want to make sure that these cars are made as safe as possible. And now we just have to make sure that it is enacted. Let's save the children.
Thank you so much to Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky and her staff. The Congresswoman is a really critical player in advancing this legislation because she is the chairperson of the committee with jurisdiction. So we're very lucky and thankful for the Congresswoman's dedication to this legislation. I'd now like to welcome Dr. Andrew and Jamie Dill. The Dill family of Evansville, Indiana, lost their 3-year-old son, Oliver, whose nickname is Ollie Dill, on July 9th, 2019, after he was unknowingly left in the car by his father on a day when their routine was unusual. Thank you so much for your bravery in joining us today, Andrew and Jamie.
Thank you, Kathy. June 9th, 2019. It was the day my wife, Jamie, and I lost our baby boy, Oliver Ollie Dill. That morning, we decided to take our kids to see Toy Story 4 after work. She usually dropped Ollie off at daycare, but had decided to stay home and pack for our upcoming family vacation. Instead, I decided to take Ollie to childcare before going to my office. My day at work was rather uneventful. As I was finishing for the day, I received a call from Jamie stating that we need to leave for the movie pretty soon. She also said that the childcare app used to document what Ollie ate for lunch reflected that he was not in attendance that day. I assured Jamie that I left Oliver at childcare and simply forgot to sign him in, which was not unusual. I drove to the childcare center and, before entering the building, decided to organize the straps on Oliver's car seat to make sure it would be easier for me to buckle him in. That is when I saw his lifeless body. I cannot even begin to describe the horror of seeing your child, the object of your highest unconditional love, dead because you forgot him in a car on a hot day. I had told my wife, Jamie, earlier that day, and with a great deal of certainty, that I absolutely had dropped off our son. I was positive he was safe and being cared for. I knew in my heart that I had dropped him off at childcare. But tragically, I was wrong. I was in total shock and disbelief that I did not drop him off. How could this have happened? I have since learned that our memories can create false memories and that this has happened to hundreds of other people. If you have not already, you will soon read about another child dying in a manner similar to my son this year. I am confident in saying this because there have been nearly 1,000 hot car deaths since 1990. I had heard of parents unknowingly leaving their children in cars, but never imagined it would happen to us. Never thought it happened to responsible parents until it happened with Ollie. I have learned this happens to the most loving parents, the ones that carefully plan a nursery when they are expecting, the ones that are always worried about safety. After over 20 years of educating the public on this issue, and with awareness at an all-time high, the number of children dying in hot cars continues to rise. Education and awareness are not enough. Technology in all vehicles is critical to prevent hot car tragedies. We will never get to see Ollie go to school, graduate, get married, or have children. We will never know what he wanted to be when he grows up. Never see him play baseball the way he yearned to do while watching his big brother. We don't want any more families to experience the horrific and painful loss so many families are currently living with today. As such, we urge the passage of the Hot Cars Act to prevent children from needlessly dying when left alone in vehicles. I cannot think of an endeavor more noble than saving the lives of children. This is an opportunity for our elected leaders to do just that. It has been said that the moral measure of a society is how well it treats our most vulnerable populations. We, the people, are trusting our elected officials to help our children, our future. Thank you for your time and for your consideration of the Hot Cars Act.
Thank you, Andrew. Words cannot express my empathy and sympathy for you and your family and Jamie. So thank you so much again for joining us today. I'd now like to welcome Dr. David Diamond. Dr. Diamond is a professor of psychology, molecular pharmacology, and physiology at the University of South Florida. He has conducted extensive research into the causes of memory lapse that can cause a parent or caregiver to lose awareness of a child in the backseat of a car. Dr. Diamond, thanks for joining us today.
I'd like to thank you, Jeanette, especially Kids in Cars, for inviting me to speak at the press conference today and to be involved in the research that Jeanette has actually contributed so much toward. I'll share with you that I've been studying the brain and memory for over 40 years, but I was taken aback when I was contacted by a news reporter about 15 years ago who asked me about how it was that a child died in a car after a parent had forgotten the child. There was nothing in my training that could prepare me to answer that question. So I really wasn't of much use to that news reporter at the time. But as a parent myself and a scientist, I was curious. So I searched the internet and I found the kidsincars.org site. I spoke with Jeanette and I learned that hundreds of children had died as a result of being forgotten in cars. So I realized then this was not an isolated incident. So I then interviewed dozens of parents to try to understand the circumstances which led to these children dying in hot cars. And what was so apparent, and what you see also with Ollie's father, the suffering that these people have experienced, it's very clear that these are not negligent parents. These are normal, attentive, and loving parents. So I sought a way to understand the science of how children are forgotten in cars. And I've identified patterns that help us to understand this. And what you saw with Andrew, you see hundreds of times. You have a parent that is driving on a route, perhaps hundreds of times, often going to work on a route in which the parent is not bringing the child to daycare. So it's out of the ordinary for the parent to bring the child to daycare. And what happens is that we have a brain memory system that will take us from point A to point B, this habit memory system, almost subconsciously. And it dominates our thinking. And so it interferes with another brain memory system, our conscious brain memory system, which keeps tracks of the day's events. That prospective memory, which we call planning to do something in the future, is actually suppressed by our habit memory system. And so one way to think about this is a typical activity is you're on your way home from work and you plan to stop at the store on the way. And you drive right by that store and end up home and you forget to pick up the medication or the groceries. Now understand, the immediate reaction is, well, remembering a child isn't anything like remembering groceries. And if we could design a brain to be perfect, I would completely agree. And then what we would have is we would have a beacon going off in the corner of our eye for the entire drive, which would say, stop at the store, or your child is in the back seat today. But we have a terribly flawed brain. We have a brain that loses information when we do something out of habit and we go into this autopilot mode. And especially that autopilot mode becomes more active when we are stressed and we are sleep deprived, something that is so common, especially with young children. And so when we arrive at our destination, what is critical to understand is that we have lost awareness of the plan, and that is the power of our habit brain system. So when we exit the car, as you've heard from Ollie's father, we have not only lost awareness of the plan, we've created a false memory that if we're at work, we must have accomplished the plan. Our child must be at daycare. And we carry with us that false memory throughout the entire day. And so that's how we have to understand how these brain systems interact. And so as has been mentioned already, we have warnings built into our cars, a warning that our door is open, that our trunk is open, that our headlights are on. And think about the circumstance in which you're driving during the day in which it is bright out and it starts raining and you put your headlights on. When you drive and then get to your destination, You have lost awareness that your headlights are on. And what do we have built in? Because leaving your headlights on, eventually you can have a dead battery. So we have built into the car a reminder that your headlights are on, or they go off automatically. And so that takes into account the flaws in how our brain functions. And so the low-tech approach, which I emphasize to people, is we need to have a reminder. If that reminder is as simple as taking a toy out of the car seat when you put your child in and put it in the front where it's in view, it'll tell you on this drive, you get that reminder cue that says your child is in the car. And we need that reminder cue. Now that depends on the parent doing something, accepting that the parent or caretaker can forget their child. What is so much more important is we need an automated system to help us with these flaws in how our brain function. It is so important that the Hot Cars Act passed to take into account that we have flaws in how our brain functions. These flaws are more powerful than the love we have for our children. And so it is essential that the Hot Cars Act pass so we have automatic material, automatic equipment that is in our car that will detect if our child is in the car and we have forgotten when we arrive at our destination. Thank you for including me today.
Thanks, Dr. Diamond. Thank you for explaining a really complicated process to something that's very relatable. I think that it's safe to say no one gets into their car thinking they're going to get into a crash. And that's why we have seatbelts and airbags. Similarly, no one gets into a car thinking that they're going to forget their child. And that's why this technology is vital and it's inexpensive and this bill needs to pass so we can make that happen. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Norm Collins. Dr. Collins lives in Charleston, South Carolina. He lost his grandson, Norman Lee Van Collins III, known as Bishop, on May 29th, 2011, at only 3 months old after a miscommunication between Bishop's father and a fellow churchgoer about who was bringing the baby into church. Dr. Collins, thanks so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Kathy. Thank you so much. On May 29, 2011, it is a date that is etched in the chronicles of time in our hearts for me and my family. It is the day when I received a phone call from a church friend who informed me that my son, Norman II, needed me to come to Clarksdale, Mississippi, my hometown, right away because something had happened to my 3-month-old grandson, Norman Collins III, who was affectionately known as Bishop. After several more frantic phone calls, I eventually received word that our dear beloved Bishop was dead, the victim of a heat stroke after being unknowingly left in his parents' hot car in a church parking lot on a 93-degree Sunday afternoon, all due to a miscommunication. Grief-stricken, all I remember was the pain in my heart not felt by me since I witnessed the death of my mother 10 years earlier. The daily horror that I and my family encountered at the thought of Bishop buckled in his car seat, crying relentlessly, sweating profusely, seizing uncontrollably, and extending his little arms for help with no one to attend to him. At times, it is simply too much to bear for any human. As one would imagine, the days since Bishop's death have not been easy, but they've yielded several positives, including bringing to the forefront the need to build awareness and prevention of child safety in and around cars. Yes, Bishop's death was tragic and it was unintentional. It was the result of confusion and misunderstanding between two people. Many people don't understand that a simple miscommunication can result in the death of a child in a hot car. Sometimes dad and mom bring the baby into the house from the car and vice versa. If either person thinks the baby is napping in their crib, it can be too late before the ramifications of a simple miscommunication are found. In our tragedy, the person who was asked to take the baby into the child care center at the church had misunderstood the communication. It wasn't until after services had ended and his parents went to pick him up from the church's daycare were the ramifications of that simple miscommunication known. I have thought so many times how inexpensive and effective technology would have saved our dear bishop and countless others. Living with this hole in our heart is only deeper or deepened because we know it's totally preventable. Life would have been so different today for our entire family if we would have received an alert that precious little bishop had been left in the car. This year, we would be celebrating his 10th birthday rather than commemorating his untimely death on Memorial Day weekend. For this reason, we call upon our lawmaking government officials to assist in the effort by supporting and passing the Hot Cars Act to save lives and avoid any more families from having to endure the lifelong horror of grief that ours and so many other families have encountered due to the preventable tragedies of hot car deaths. Please help us turn our pain into power, our tragedy into triumph, and our agony into positive action. We all have a God-given right, a responsibility, and a reason to protect our children as well as each other. Whereas we cannot change what happened to our precious bishop and the almost 1,000 children who have died from heat stroke since 1990, as advocates, parents, teachers, rescuers, and legislators, we must pass the Hot Cars Act immediately. I challenge each person here today and around the United States to help us by working together and pledge to never stop talking, to never stop raising awareness, and to never stop working to require technology in all vehicles to make hot car deaths a thing of the past. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Collins. I can tell you, we most certainly pledge and stand with you, but more importantly, we've got to stop asking you to come here and talk about the worst day of your life, the worst day of all of these families' lives. We've got to bring this bill over the finish line. I'd now like to show a short video so that you can see that this technology exists and works very effectively and would be extremely inexpensive if it required as standard equipment in new vehicles. So please watch the video with us. Thank you.
VIAR provides multi-functionality on a single chip platform, ensuring less complexity and lower costs with only one sensor. VIAR's solution delivers application-ready child presence detection. It classifies children and adults, identifying babies even under blankets, as well as monitoring footwells.
When a vehicle is turned off, the system waits for an adult to get out and retrieve the child. The radar sensor briefly activates, just long enough to detect anyone who might be there. Aptiv's sensor can even see through blankets to detect a child's breathing or pulse. Alternatively, we can use a camera, the same one used to monitor the driver's awareness, to identify a baby, pet, car seat, or other objects that might have been left behind. If the vehicle detects an infant, older child, or pet, it can take a number of actions. It can send a text or call a registered number, activate a car horn or alarm. And if the vehicle is electric, it could even switch on climate control to keep the cabin cool.
VitaSense is sensitive enough to detect the breathing of babies, even when they are sleeping. VitaSense is invisibly integrated in the vehicle behind the headliner, and it can trigger multiple warnings and notifications.
Attention, an unattended child has been detected.
Our life as men and white, and hardships then could scarcely scare us into quitting. Things were far from being fine. We often dine on a dime, but there never was a time we didn't.
This one.
I think those are some pretty poignant examples of how this technology can work. I'd now like to introduce our last speaker, Jeanette Fennell. Jeanette is the founder and president of Kids and Car Safety. Jeanette has dedicated decades to improving safety for children in and around vehicles. She is also a board member of Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. Jeanette, thank you so much for your leadership and for organizing today's event.
Thank you, Kathy. We really appreciate the fabulous job you did today in helping us better understand why these tragic incidents continue to happen. And I'm sure everybody did learn quite a bit today from our speakers, and they now are better able to understand how and why these tragedies continue to happen. The positive news is we just saw in this video montage the different available technologies that are so exciting, because you've just witnessed how these deaths and injuries can be prevented.
Jeanette, I don't mean to interrupt you. Sorry about that, but you're not on camera. There we go. Now you're on camera.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm not quite sure why that happened, but is this fine now?
Yes.
Okay. So anyway, I was just saying how excited we were to be able to see these technologies, because now we know that there is technology there, and that is the answer to how we can end these deaths and injuries. You know, we do live in such an ever-changing world, and the 2020 pandemic taught us to learn how to do things differently. In fact, we are communicating via Zoom today because this is how we're doing business these days. While everyone was locked down last year, schools and childcare centers and many things were closed. So wouldn't you think that hot car deaths would end? Well, that did not happen. The number of deaths last year did go down to 25 from an average of 38, but it certainly shouldn't take a pandemic to prevent hot car deaths. While so many children were home last year, many of the hot car deaths were due to children getting into vehicles on their own. It is vital that any technology installed in vehicles can detect the presence of a child or pet if they are unknowingly left behind or gain access to a vehicle on their own. The Hot Cars Act will make that happen. It's really about utilizing and perfecting the resources we already have to save innocent lives. I know that you've heard from almost every speaker that since 1990, almost 1,000 children have died in hot cars. You know, that's not just a number. It's the suffering of hundreds of families and communities simply trying to endure the unimaginable. Take a moment, if you would, to imagine 1,000 children in front of you right now. Now, also imagine all of their parents, siblings, extended family members, caregivers, and loved ones. Now also think about all of the EMS workers, the police officers, doctors, nurses, and reporters who were directly impacted by their tragedies. This number becomes very exponential. What makes the pain cut even deeper is that we know there's solutions, and we know they can currently be applied to prevent these deaths. The other pandemic outcome that we have wrestled with this year is the importance of science in our world. How many people truly understand that one of the main reasons hot car deaths continue is simply has to do with brain science? We certainly wish we could train our memories to never forget, but this is a very human condition we all deal with. Dr. Diamond has studied how our memories work for over 40 years. and he is able to articulate exactly how and why this takes place. Nobody in the world has an infallible memory. This is not about bad parenting. This is not a crime. This is a public health issue that we all must work together to end. Safety is something every family deserves. It shouldn't be an option, and it shouldn't be political. The federal government, our legislators, automakers, along with safety advocates, and all our families have the ability to solve this problem. Yet our government and industry has shamefully remained complacent about the children who continue to die from something so utterly preventable. We need to make sure Congress mandates a detection and alarm system to save the lives of our children and eliminate that crushing pain that causes our families through no fault of their own. We know technology works. It's sitting on a shelf somewhere waiting to save young lives. Today, technology saves your car battery. Tomorrow, it could save your child. What are we waiting for? I'd like to thank you for all joining us. We're now going to open it up for questions from the media. You can send your questions via the chat box or raise your hand and we will call on you so you can ask your question.
All right, we have a few questions in the chat box. The first one is from George Torres, and that is, when will the Hot Cars Act be reintroduced in the House, or has it already?
I can answer that. It actually has just been reintroduced today. In fact, as part of our materials, we are adding a copy of that language for everyone to review. So today's the day, and we're very happy about that. So thanks for that good question.
Okay, and we've got another one from Makia Wallace. Makia is the mother of a 21-month-old boy named Jace Leslie, who passed away in a hot car in September of last year. And her question is, what do you plan to do about vehicles that are already on the roadway today? Kids are being born every day, and you know, this is an urgent matter. So what's going to happen with the vehicles that don't have the technology today?
Makia, thank you for that question, and we're so very sorry about your loss as well. The language in the Hot Cars Act will take care of that particular issue. The way it reads is that the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration would be tasked with looking at available technologies that are currently an aftermarket product. They will test and they will find out which products really work as promised, as well as put that on their website and let everyone know. So we have thought about that because we want technology and prevention designs to be out there as soon as possible, but we want to make sure that they work. So as per language in the Hot Cars Act, it will require our government to test existing systems and let you know which ones work the best so you can make your decisions based on that information.
Thank you, Jeanette. The next question, we've gotten this from a few people. Who's pushing back against the legislation and why?
Well, Kathy, you want to take that one? I see you took your...
Yeah, I'd be glad to take that. I touched upon it during my remarks. Unfortunately, the auto industry always pushes back against any type of regulation because they would rather do it voluntarily. But we know without a doubt that any type of voluntary industry agreement is not effective. First of all, it's voluntary. Second of all, companies can walk away from it at any time. There's no mechanism that requires them to do so. Third point is that there's no minimum performance standard when there's a voluntary agreement. So you can have a fantastic system, or you can have a system that's inadequate and doesn't accomplish it. And what's really terrifying about the inadequate systems is that parents think they're doing the right thing, or think that they have the technology that will prevent this from happening, and they rely on it. And then the technology doesn't perform as needed. So that is why this bill is so essential. We can't rely on voluntary agreements. We can't rely on the industry just saying, trust us, we can get this done. We need this legislation so that the US Department of Transportation is required to issue a rule that states companies must get this into new vehicles. And they must do it by a date certain, meaning it cannot go on indefinitely. It needs to happen expediently, because with every passing day, there's a risk of another child dying in a hot car.
I think that's a great answer to that question. And it is really important for people to understand the difference between something that's voluntary and something that is required by law. And I know the automakers are talking about a voluntary agreement that they've set forward, but unfortunately, it does not detect the presence of a child. And it does nothing to let us know if a child's got in a vehicle on their own. So that's why common sense, straightforward language that we have in the Hot Cars bill is so necessary.
Thank you, Jeanette and Kathy. We got another questions, a couple more coming through. Can you provide an update on what the changes have been from the last legislative session to this one with the Hot Cars Act?
Well, it's not that different. And the other thing I want to make sure everybody knows is last year, the Hot Cars Act did make it all the way through the full House. So we're hoping to repeat that performance again this year as quickly as possible. But the language just has been refined a little bit and made it perfectly clear what the expectations are. But the key thing that people really need to understand about this bill is we need to be able to detect the presence of a child or a pet that's been left alone in a vehicle, or if they get in on their own. And those are the ways the children die, and we can prevent that. And that's what the language of this bill does.
Thank you. Is there anything we can do to help encourage the passing of the bill?
Oh, that's the best question I've ever had an opportunity to answer. Yes, yes, and yes. We need everybody to get involved. And if you can contact your members of Congress, have your neighbors and your friends and everybody, let the people in Washington, D.C. know that this is important. This should have been done years ago. And this is going to be our year. So if everyone works together and lets our Congress people know that this is so important to you, I think we can make this happen.
Great. Do you have a automotive technology that you prefer, whether that's from an automaker or a supplier?
We are never prescriptive in the language and the intent of bills that we write. It really has to fit more of a performance standard. And that standard is you have to be able to detect the presence of a child if they're alone in a vehicle or if they get in. I see Kathy also unmuted her microphone, so I think she has something to say about this as well.
Yeah, Jeanette, thanks. I thought we could give an example of a recent victory that we shared in rearview cameras. Similarly to hot cars, the rearview camera bill that was enacted did not prescribe any type of technology. Rather, it said auto manufacturers have to meet certain minimum performances, as Jeanette mentioned. And we are very pleased that that victory, albeit took way too long to happen, has resulted in every new car now has rearview cameras. Just like just like younger people now can't imagine a day when cars didn't have seatbelts or airbags. In the future, someday people will think there was a time when cars didn't have rearview cameras, and all of us will remember that day. And we're looking forward to the day when people will think There was a time when cars didn't have reminders and alert systems for children. It's absurd and it needs to end. And that's why we need to bring this legislation over the finish line. As Jeanette mentioned, the House passed it last year. We're pleased to announce the reintroduction of the bill this year and expect it to move forward in both the House and the Senate, and look forward to, as Congressman Ryan said, President Biden signing this into law.
Okay, we've got another question from Michael Strong. Ford, Nissan, Kia, Hyundai, GM, and others all have some form of a warning system in place currently. Are these systems adequate?
Well, I'll answer that very easily. The answer is no. There is a system which we're happy to have out there because it certainly is better than nothing. But how it works is if you open your back door before you take off on your journey, when you arrive, you will get a warning that says, check the rear seats. And that's excellent. But it doesn't detect if there's a child. You're going to get that same warning if you put a box of Kleenexes in the back seat. You're going to get that same warning anytime you open the back door before you leave. Now, there's some problems with that. So let's say you put your child in your vehicle and you're on your way to work and you're going to drop them at childcare before you get to work. Let's say you stop for a cup of coffee, or let's say you go through and decide, I need some gas, I better fill up on my way to work. Well, you stop, you turn off your vehicle, you fill up your tank, and then you leave. Well, you think that there's going to be technology there to help remind you if your child's been left behind, but you won't receive a reminder because if you don't open that door within 10 minutes of leaving on your journey, it won't kick in. But more importantly, it does nothing to tell us if a child has entered a vehicle on their own. And that's clearly over 1/4 of the deaths that we've documented every year. So the other part I need to answer of your question is there are some technologies in the Hyundai and the Kia, certain models, that does go and take that next step. They have some ultrasonic sensors that can detect if a child's been left behind. So they've taken that extra step before they were even required to do so. So hats off to them, but we still need very, very much to get this Hot Car Act passed and every vehicle to have this technology installed right away.
Jeanette, if I could add to that, the fact that some of these car manufacturers are putting the different technologies into cars is evidence that this can happen and that it can happen inexpensively. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. So that's why this legislation is so critical. Additionally, the car manufacturers right now, while some may be putting them into cars in these model years, maybe next model year they'll opt not to. And that's why the legislation is critical. Additionally, right now, some of the technologies are in different packages, or you can't just purchase it a la carte, if you will. And not every family can afford to buy different bells and whistles on their cars. Not that this technology is a bells and whistles, it's most certainly is not. But maybe it's bundled with a heated steering wheel or a higher end package. And that really goes to an issue of equity. Not only people who have the extra budget to purchase these should be afforded the benefits of these technologies. Everyone should get it. And that's why it needs to be standard equipment in all cars.
Thank you, Kathy. That's a very good point. All children deserve the same protections. We have a question from Michael Budo, probably said that wrong, about the even flow sensor safe car seat technology. And I'd like to answer that one, actually. He's asking, do we recommend it? And if there are other products on the market right now that parents can buy. I actually used the even flow car seat personally with my son about 4 years ago when he was born. And I was really surprised to find that after a few short weeks of hearing the audio alert, let me take a step back. So the even flow car seat, for those of you who don't know, has a chest clip. And when that chest clip is buckled, meaning that there's a child in the car seat, the car seat connects with your vehicle and provides a nice little soft musical chime to remind you to check the back seat when you turn the car off. And after a few short weeks of using that car seat, I would have people get in my car and ask me what that noise was when I turned the car off. I didn't hear it anymore. It went off every single time I parked, and it became, background noise. I just completely stopped hearing it. And having just an alert that's audio like that is very concerning. Just kind of like with backup sensors, when you have them going off all the time, you tend to drown out that noise. And then, Jeanette, do you want to answer the part about other products on the market?
Well, I do think that the even flow product is something that is a step you can take right now, so it can help remind people. So, I want to make sure people understand that it's out there, it's available, and it is a good reminder. We're trying to get reminders in vehicles. It will take longer with the Hot Cars Act because that's not going to happen next year. It's going to take a little while for that to be installed in vehicles. But that's also why we have the language in the Hot Cars Act to make sure that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration will test all the different systems to see what works best. But, I would say until we get this bill passed and it's in all vehicles, we all need to be aware of this. Always look before you walk. If there's any technology that's available, try to install it. A lot of people talk about the fact that on the Waze app, when you arrive at your destination, it can remind you to check the back seat. Again, that's a nice reminder, but I don't know about you. On my way to work, I don't usually set Waze because I do know how to get there. So there's pluses and minuses for everything, but the answer is the Hot Cars Act. So let's get that done just as quickly as possible.
Definitely. We like to refer to those, right, Jeanette, as a layer of protection, but not something to be relied on completely. Having some layers is always important. We've got another question. Does the bill cover the luggage space in the back of a hatchback, or only the rear seat area is covered for detection with the bill?
I'm going to guess that is a question probably specific to SUVs. And it's my understanding for most of the technologies, they can cover up to 2 or 3 rows in a vehicle. I don't know the answer to the actual, back of an SUV, but we can certainly find out that answer. But my understanding is it really is just the first 2 rows or 3 rows, and that includes the floorboards.
Yeah, if I could add to that, Jeanette, also, you're correct, and it covers the vehicle. And then that determination will probably be worked out by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration when they're conducting their rulemaking. So there's, the bill language is pretty clear in saying it covers the entire vehicle, and then some of the details will be worked out during the rulemaking process.
Right, and I can tell you from our extensive database it is very rare, if at all, that children have been found in that area. Probably the most prominent place that children are found in these situations, if they've gotten in on their own or gotten out of their car seat, is in the floorboard area of either the front or the back seat, and that would be covered.
All right, that's all the questions we have right now. If anybody has another question, please submit it.
Well, I do want to thank everybody for joining us today. And we will be issuing a press release. It will include links to a lot of information about the issue of hot cars. It will also have the language for the Hot Cars Act. And as always, anytime you have questions or need to have specific data or information, we're here for you. But we want everyone to work together to put an end to these terrible tragedies. And again, thank you to our incredibly brave and special families. You're our inspiration. Thank you.